The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the small Italian village of Castelnuovo. The air was thick with the scent of blooming wildflowers and freshly baked bread from the nearby bakery, but for Luca, a 10-year-old boy with tousled brown hair and deep brown eyes, the world felt heavy and gray. Today, everything felt different. Luca stood at the edge of a small cemetery, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached a modest grave marked by a simple stone cross. The words etched into the stone, "Maria Rossi, beloved mother," seemed to mock him as he knelt beside it, tears spilling down his cheeks. Just days ago, he had watched as they lowered his mother into the earth, her coffin draped in flowers and surrounded by mourners who whispered their condolences. But none of that mattered now. All he could feel was an aching emptiness. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I miss you so much." He pressed his small hands against the cool earth, feeling an overwhelming sense of loss wash over him. "Why did you have to leave me?" Memories flooded his mind. Her warm laughter echoing through their home, her gentle touch as she tucked him into bed at night, and the way she always knew how to make everything better with just a hug. She had been his anchor in a world that often felt chaotic and confusing. Without her, he felt adrift. As he knelt there, Luca closed his eyes tightly and wished for the impossible, to have his mother back with him again. "Please," he begged softly, "take me with you. I don't want to be here anymore." The words escaped his lips like a prayer, filled with desperation and longing. The wind rustled through the trees surrounding the cemetery, carrying with it a whisper that seemed to echo Luca's pain. He opened his eyes and looked around, half expecting to see her standing there, smiling at him as she always had. But there was only silence, the kind of silence that felt heavy and suffocating. "Why did you leave me?" he cried out, frustration mingling with sorrow. "I don't understand." Tears streamed down his face as he buried his head in his hands, feeling utterly alone in the world. Just then, an elderly woman appeared at the edge of the cemetery, a figure dressed in dark clothing with a kind face framed by wispy gray hair. It was Nonna Rosa, known throughout Castelnuovo for her wisdom and gentle spirit. She moved slowly but purposefully toward Luca, her eyes filled with understanding. "Ah, my dear boy," she said softly as she approached him. "I can see your heart is heavy." Luca looked up at her through tear-stained cheeks. "Nonna Rosa," he sniffled. "My mom, she's gone. I don't know how to live without her." Nonna Rosa knelt beside him, her presence warm and comforting like a soft blanket on a cold day. "Grief is a heavy burden to bear," she said gently. "But your mother's love will always be with you." Luca shook his head defiantly. "But it doesn't feel like it. I want her back. I want to be with her." His voice cracked as he spoke, raw emotion spilling forth. The old woman placed a reassuring hand on Luca's shoulder. "Sometimes," she began thoughtfully, "when we lose someone we love deeply, we must find ways to keep their memory alive within us." She paused for a moment before continuing. "There are ways to connect with those we've lost, even if they can no longer walk beside us." Luca looked at her curiously through his tears. "What do you mean?" Nonna Rosa smiled gently, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. "I have something for you," she said cryptically. "A gift that may help you find solace in your sorrow." As Luca listened intently, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a small spark amid the overwhelming darkness of grief. "Come," Nonna Rosa beckoned softly, rising to her feet and extending her hand toward him. "Let us go somewhere special." With a hesitant nod, Luca took her hand and stood up slowly from beside his mother's grave. As they walked together through the cemetery and into the village beyond, he couldn't shake off the feeling that perhaps there was still magic left in this world, magic that could bring him closer to the mother he missed so dearly. The days that followed Maria Rossi's funeral felt like a blur to Luca. Each morning, he woke up with a heavy heart, the absence of his mother echoing through the quiet halls of their home in Castelnuovo. The sun would rise, casting light through the window, but to Luca, it felt like the warmth had been drained from the world. His father, Marco, was a shadow of his former self. Once a jovial man who filled their home with laughter and stories, he now moved through life in a daze, his eyes often distant and lost. The two of them barely spoke. Grief had wrapped around them like a thick fog, isolating them from one another even as they shared the same space. At school, Luca felt like an outsider among his classmates. The laughter and chatter that once filled the playground now seemed foreign and distant. His friends, though well-meaning, didn't know how to approach him. They offered awkward smiles and hesitant pats on the back, but their words felt hollow. "I'm so sorry about your mom," they would say, their voices tinged with pity. Each time he heard those words, it was like a fresh wound reopening. During recess, while other children played soccer or chased one another around the yard, Luca found solace under a large oak tree at the edge of the playground. He would sit there alone, sketching in his notebook, drawings of his mother smiling, or of their home filled with warmth and laughter. It was a way to keep her memory alive, but it also reminded him of what he had lost. One afternoon, as he sat beneath the oak tree with his sketchbook resting on his lap, he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Julia, one of his classmates, standing hesitantly a few feet away. She was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, bright yellow daisies and delicate bluebells. "Hey, Luca," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I brought you these." Luca blinked in surprise as she stepped closer and knelt down beside him. "Thank you," he replied quietly, taking the flowers from her small hands. They were beautiful, vibrant against the backdrop of his sadness. "I thought they might cheer you up," Julia said gently. "I know things are really hard right now." Luca nodded but didn't know how to respond. He wanted to tell her how much he missed his mother, how every moment felt like an uphill battle, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he forced a small smile and said, "They're really nice." Julia looked at him with concern in her eyes. "If you ever want to talk, or if you just want someone to sit with you, I'm here." For a moment, Luca felt a flicker of warmth in his chest, a reminder that even in grief, there were still people who cared. But just as quickly as it came, that warmth faded into sadness again. "Thanks," he said finally. "I appreciate it." As Julia returned to join her friends on the playground, Luca watched her go with mixed emotions swirling inside him. He longed for connection but felt trapped by his sorrow, a feeling that no one could truly understand what he was going through. When he returned home that afternoon, Marco was sitting at the kitchen table with his head buried in his hands. The remnants of lunch lay untouched before him, half-eaten bread and a bowl of soup growing cold. "Dad," Luca ventured cautiously. Marco looked up slowly, his eyes red-rimmed and weary. "Hey there," he said softly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "How was work?" Luca asked awkwardly as he took a seat across from him. "It was fine," Marco replied with a sigh. "Just busy." Luca sensed that something more lay beneath those words, an ocean of grief that both of them were struggling to navigate alone. "Dad," Luca began hesitantly after a moment's pause. "I miss Mom." Marco's expression shifted instantly. Pain flickered across his face like lightning in a stormy sky. "Me too," he admitted quietly, looking away as if ashamed to show vulnerability. They sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of their shared loss hanging heavily between them. Finally, Marco spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to do this without her." Luca nodded slowly. He felt the same way but didn't have the words to express it fully. Instead, they both sat there together, two grieving souls bound by love yet separated by their own pain. That night as Luca lay in bed staring at the ceiling above him, he thought about Nona Rose's words from earlier that day, "Your mother's love will always be with you." He wanted to believe it, he wanted to feel her presence beside him again. With those thoughts swirling in his mind like leaves caught in an autumn windstorm, Luca closed his eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep, one filled with dreams of laughter and light but haunted by shadows that whispered reminders of what had been lost. The following week dragged on, each day blending into the next like the muted colors of a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Luca continued to retreat into his sketches, using art as a refuge from the pain that enveloped him. But as the days passed, the ache in his heart grew heavier, and he found himself wandering aimlessly through Castelnuovo, searching for something he couldn't quite name. One crisp afternoon, while meandering through the village's cobblestone streets, Luca stumbled upon a small market bustling with life. Stalls overflowed with fresh produce, colorful fabrics, and handmade crafts. The air was filled with the rich scents of ripe tomatoes and fragrant herbs, but even the vibrant atmosphere couldn't lift his spirits. As he wandered from stall to stall, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "Luca, over here." He turned to see Julia waving at him from a nearby stall where her mother was selling homemade pastries. She smiled brightly, her enthusiasm infectious. "Come try these," she called, holding out a warm pastry dusted with powdered sugar. Luca hesitated but then walked over, accepting the treat. "Thanks," he mumbled, taking a small bite. The sweetness burst in his mouth, momentarily distracting him from his sorrow. "Delicious, right?" Julia beamed. "My mom makes the best pastries in Castelnuovo." "Yeah, it's really good," Luca replied, managing a small smile. As they chatted about school and their favorite games, Luca felt a flicker of normalcy return, a reminder that life continued even amid grief. But soon enough, he felt the familiar heaviness creeping back in. "I should get going," he said reluctantly after a few minutes. "I need to, do some things." "Okay," Julia said, her expression softening. "But if you ever want to hang out or talk, I'm here for you." Luca nodded appreciatively and waved goodbye as he turned to leave. He wandered deeper into the village, feeling both lighter from their conversation and heavier with the weight of his thoughts. As he walked past the edge of town, he spotted an old woman sitting on a weathered bench beneath an ancient olive tree. It was Nonna Rosa, her silver hair glinting in the sunlight like strands of spun gold. She was knitting something colorful and intricate, her hands moving deftly despite her age. Curiosity drew Luca closer. "Hello, Nonna Rosa," he greeted softly. "Ah, Luca, come sit with me," she said warmly, gesturing to the empty space beside her on the bench. He hesitated but then took a seat next to her. The old woman's presence felt comforting, like a warm blanket on a chilly evening. "I've been thinking about you," Nonna Rosa said as she continued knitting. "How are you holding up?" Luca shrugged, unsure how to articulate his feelings. "It's hard," he admitted finally. "I miss my mom every day." Nonna Rosa nodded knowingly. "Grief can feel like an endless winter, cold and dark, but remember that spring always follows." Luca looked at her quizzically. "What do you mean?" "Spring brings new life," she explained gently. "It reminds us that while we may lose someone we love dearly, their spirit can still live on within us." "But how?" Luca asked earnestly. "How can I keep my mom with me?" The old woman paused her knitting and turned to face him fully, her eyes sparkling with wisdom and kindness. "There are many ways to honor those we've lost," she said thoughtfully. "You can share stories about her or create something beautiful in her memory." Luca listened intently as Nonna Rosa continued speaking about traditions and rituals that could help him connect with his mother's spirit. She spoke of lighting candles on special days or planting flowers in her honor, ways to celebrate life rather than dwell solely on loss. "I have something for you," Nonna Rosa said suddenly, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small wooden box intricately carved with swirling patterns and delicate designs. It was beautiful, a deep mahogany color that gleamed in the sunlight. "What is it?" Luca asked, intrigued. "This box is special," Nonna Rosa explained as she handed it to him. "It holds magic that can help you connect with your mother's spirit whenever you need it." Luca's eyes widened in wonder as he examined the box closely. It felt warm in his hands as if it pulsed with energy waiting to be unleashed. "What do I do with it?" he asked eagerly. "Take it to your mother's grave," Nonna Rosa instructed gently. "When you're ready, open it and make a wish from your heart, one that comes from love." Luca felt a rush of hope at her words, a feeling he hadn't experienced in what felt like ages. "Thank you," he whispered sincerely as he clutched the box tightly against his chest. "Remember," Nonna Rosa added softly as she resumed her knitting, "love never truly leaves us, it transforms into something else, something beautiful." With those words echoing in his mind, Luca stood up from the bench feeling lighter than he had in days. He waved goodbye to Nonna Rosa and began walking back toward the cemetery, his heart racing with anticipation at what might happen next. As he made his way through Castelnuovo once more, the sun shining brightly overhead, he felt an unfamiliar sense of purpose guiding him forward. Perhaps there was still magic left in this world after all, perhaps there was still hope waiting just beyond the horizon. The sun began to set as Luca made his way to the cemetery, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. He clutched the small wooden box tightly in his hands, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. Each step felt heavier with anticipation, and his heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. What if this box held the magic Nonna Rosa spoke of? What if it could truly connect him with his mother? As he approached his mother's grave, the familiar ache in his chest returned. The flowers he had placed there earlier in the week were wilting, but he could still see the vibrant colors peeking through the fading petals. Kneeling beside the grave, he took a deep breath, steadying himself against the wave of emotion that washed over him. "Mom," he whispered, tracing the letters of her name carved into the stone. "I miss you so much." Tears sprang to his eyes as he thought about all the moments they would never share again. The laughter, the hugs, the stories she used to tell him before bed. With trembling hands, Luca opened the wooden box. Inside was a small piece of parchment and a tiny candle. He carefully lifted them out and set them on the ground beside him. The candle was unlit, but it seemed to glow softly in the fading light. "What do I do now?" he murmured to himself, glancing around to ensure he was alone. The cemetery was quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Taking a deep breath, Luca picked up the candle and held it close to his heart. I wish I could be with you again," he said softly, feeling the weight of those words settle heavily on his shoulders. "I want to see you and hear your voice." He placed the candle back in the box and unfolded the parchment. It was blank, but somehow it felt significant, like it was waiting for him to fill it with something meaningful. "Maybe I should write something," he thought aloud. "Something from my heart." With that determination, he pulled out a pen from his pocket and began to write. "Dear Mom, I miss you every day. I wish I could talk to you again and tell you about everything that's happening in my life. I feel so lost without you. Please come back to me. Love always, Luca." As he finished writing, tears streamed down his face once more. He folded the parchment carefully and placed it back into the box alongside the candle. With a sense of finality, he closed the lid and took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Okay," he whispered to himself, "now what?" He remembered Nona Rose's words about making a wish from love. With renewed resolve, Luca took a deep breath and lit the candle using a small match he had brought along. The flame flickered gently in the cool evening air as he closed his eyes tightly. "Mom," he said aloud, his voice trembling with emotion. "If you can hear me, please come back." The wind picked up suddenly, swirling around him like a gentle embrace. The candle's flame danced wildly but did not extinguish. Instead, it burned brighter as if responding to his heartfelt plea. Luca opened his eyes just in time to see a soft glow enveloping him, a warm light that seemed to emanate from within the wooden box itself. He felt an inexplicable warmth wash over him as memories flooded back. Moments spent baking cookies together in their cozy kitchen, laughter echoing through their home during family game nights, and her soothing voice reading bedtime stories. "Mom," he breathed out in disbelief as tears filled his eyes once more. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. The air around him shimmered like heat rising off pavement on a summer day. Before him appeared a figure bathed in soft light, a woman with familiar features and an ethereal glow surrounding her. "Luca," she said gently, her voice like music carried on a soft breeze. "Mom," Luca exclaimed, unable to contain his joy as he rushed forward. He felt her warmth envelop him as they embraced, an embrace that felt both real and dreamlike at once. "I've missed you so much," Luca sobbed into her shoulder. "I've missed you too, my sweet boy," Maria replied softly, holding him tightly. "But remember, I'm always with you, in your heart and in your memories." "But how can this be real?" Luca asked, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes, eyes that sparkled with love and understanding. "There is magic in love," she explained gently. "It transcends even death. You called me here with your heart's wish." Luca's heart swelled with emotion as he realized what this moment meant. She was here with him now because of their unbreakable bond. "I want you to stay," he pleaded desperately. "I cannot stay long," Maria said softly, brushing her fingers against his cheek as if trying to imprint her love onto him forever. "But I want you to know that you are never alone." Tears streamed down Luca's face as he listened intently. Every word she spoke felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Live your life fully," she urged him gently. "Cherish our memories but also create new ones. You have so much ahead of you." "But how can I do that without you?" Luca asked, feeling a mix of sadness and confusion. "You have my strength within you," Maria reassured him with a tender smile. "Whenever you feel lost or afraid, just close your eyes and remember our love." As she spoke those words, Luca felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him, a warmth that filled every corner of his being. "I love you so much," he whispered through tears. "And I love you," Maria replied softly before stepping back slowly into the shimmering light that surrounded her. "No, don't go," Luca cried out desperately as she began to fade away. "Remember my words," she called back gently as her figure dissolved into sparkling particles that danced away on the breeze. "I will always be with you." And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind only echoes of laughter and love lingering in the air around him. Luca knelt there for what felt like an eternity, his heart full yet aching with loss once more. But this time it was different. This time there was hope intertwined with sorrow. He looked down at the wooden box still resting beside him, the candle flickering softly even though its flame had begun to dwindle, and knew that while this moment had passed, their connection would never fade away. With newfound strength coursing through him like sunlight breaking through clouds after a stormy night, Luca stood up slowly from beside his mother's grave, ready to embrace life again while carrying her spirit within him always. The morning sun filtered through Luca's window, casting a warm glow across his room. He awoke with a start, the memories of the previous night flooding back to him in vivid detail. The warmth of his mother's embrace, her loving words, and the magical glow that enveloped her were still fresh in his mind. It felt surreal, like a beautiful dream he was reluctant to leave behind. Luca sat up in bed, his heart racing with a mix of joy and disbelief. Was it real? He whispered to himself, glancing around the room as if expecting to see her sitting there beside him. But the room was empty, save for the sunlight dancing on the walls and the soft rustle of leaves outside his window. He reached for the wooden box that had been resting on his bedside table. It felt warm to the touch, as if it still held some of the magic from last night. Opening it carefully, he found the candle had burned down significantly but remained unextinguished, an encouraging sign that perhaps the connection between him and his mother was still alive. With a renewed sense of purpose, Luca jumped out of bed and prepared for the day ahead. He felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The ache of loss was still there, but now it was accompanied by a flicker of hope, a reminder that love transcended even death. After breakfast, Luca decided to visit Nonna Rosa. He needed to share what had happened and thank her for her wisdom and the magical box that had allowed him to reconnect with his mother. The village felt different today, colors seemed brighter, sounds more vibrant. Even the air felt charged with possibility. As he made his way through Castelnuovo, he noticed small things he had overlooked before, the cheerful laughter of children playing in the streets, the aroma of fresh bread wafting from the bakery, and the warmth of sunlight on his skin. Each moment felt precious, a reminder that life continued despite grief. When he arrived at Nonna Rosa's home, a quaint cottage adorned with blooming flowers, he knocked eagerly on the door. It swung open almost immediately, revealing Nonna Rosa's kind face framed by her silver hair. "Luca, my dear boy," she exclaimed, pulling him into a warm embrace. "I was hoping you would come by. I need to tell you something," Luca said breathlessly as he stepped inside, his heart racing with excitement. They settled at her kitchen table, where a pot of herbal tea simmered on the stove. The comforting aroma filled the air as Nonna Rosa poured them each a cup. "What is it, my dear?" she asked gently, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "I saw my mom last night," Luca blurted out, unable to contain himself. "She came to me. I made a wish with your box." Nonna Rosa's expression softened as she listened intently. "Oh, Luca," she said softly. "That is wonderful. Tell me everything." Luca recounted every detail, the warmth of his mother's embrace, her reassuring words about love and strength. As he spoke, he felt a sense of lightness in sharing this miraculous experience with someone who understood. "I can't believe it," he finished, tears of joy glistening in his eyes. "It felt so real. She told me she would always be with me." Nonna Rosa nodded knowingly. "Love has a way of transcending boundaries we cannot see," she said gently. "You called her spirit back because your heart was open to receiving her." Luca smiled through his tears, feeling grateful for Nonna Rosa's presence in his life. "Thank you for giving me the box," he said earnestly. "It helped me find my mom again." "Remember," Nonna Rosa replied with warmth in her voice, "it is not just about wishing for what we want, it is about cherishing those we love and keeping their memory alive in our hearts." As they sipped their tea together, Luca felt an overwhelming sense of peace settle over him, a realization that while grief would always be a part of him, so too would love and connection. After their conversation, Luca left Nonna Rosa's cottage feeling lighter than air. He wandered through Castelnuovo once more, but this time with purpose, determined to embrace life fully while honoring his mother's memory. Over the next few days, Luca began to change how he approached each moment. He started sharing stories about his mother with friends at school, how she used to bake cookies every Sunday or how they would go on adventures together in the countryside. His classmates listened intently. They laughed at his stories and offered their support in ways that made him feel less alone. One afternoon after school, while sitting under their favorite oak tree with Giulia and some other friends, Luca pulled out his sketchbook and began to draw again, this time not just memories but new scenes filled with laughter and joy. "Wow, that's amazing," Giulia exclaimed as she leaned over to see what he was creating, a vibrant picture depicting their group playing soccer under a bright blue sky. "It's just something I thought we could do together," Luca said shyly but smiled at their enthusiasm. As they played soccer later that day under the sunlit sky filled with laughter and friendship echoing around him like music, Luca realized that while he would always miss his mother deeply, he could carry her spirit within him by living fully and embracing every moment life had to offer. That night as he lay in bed staring up at the ceiling once more, he closed his eyes feeling contented knowing that love never truly leaves us, it transforms into something beautiful, a guiding light leading us forward even through our darkest days. That night as he lay in bed staring up at the ceiling once more, he closed his eyes feeling contented knowing that love never truly leaves us, it transforms into something beautiful, a guiding light leading us forward even through our darkest days. The days turned into weeks, and as autumn began to paint Castelnuovo in shades of gold and crimson, Luca found himself embracing life with a renewed spirit. The ache of loss had not vanished, but it had transformed into something softer, a bittersweet reminder of the love he had shared with his mother. Each day brought new opportunities for connection, laughter, and memories that honored her legacy. One crisp Saturday morning, Luca decided to organize a small gathering in the village square. He wanted to bring everyone together, not just to celebrate his mother's memory but also to foster the sense of community that had been so vital during his time of grief. He envisioned a day filled with games, stories, and shared laughter, much like the family gatherings he used to enjoy with his mother. With the help of Giulia and some other friends, Luca set about planning the event. They made colorful banners from fabric scraps and gathered ingredients for homemade treats. The excitement in the air was palpable as word spread throughout Castelnuovo about the upcoming celebration. On the day of the gathering, the village square was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity. Children ran around playing games while adults set up tables laden with food, freshly baked pastries, savory pies, and fragrant soups simmering in large pots. Laughter and chatter filled the air, creating a warm atmosphere that felt like a hug. As Luca looked around at his friends and neighbors coming together, he felt a surge of gratitude. This was what his mother would have wanted, a celebration of life and love. "Are you ready for this?" Giulia asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement as they stood by one of the tables. "More than ready," Luca replied, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. "I just hope everyone enjoys it." "They will," she assured him. "You've put so much thought into this." As the gathering began, Luca took a moment to reflect on how far he had come since that dark day at his mother's grave. He felt lighter now, filled with hope and love instead of sorrow. He knew that while he would always miss her, he could carry her spirit with him by living fully and cherishing every moment. When it was time to share stories, Luca stood up in front of the crowd gathered in the square. His heart raced as he looked out at familiar faces, friends who had supported him through his grief and neighbors who had shown kindness during his darkest days. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. "I wanted to celebrate my mom's life and all the love she gave me. She taught me how important it is to cherish our memories and share them with others." Luca took a deep breath as he shared anecdotes about his mother, the way she would dance around the kitchen while cooking or how they would spend afternoons exploring the countryside together. Laughter erupted from the crowd as they listened intently, their smiles encouraging him to continue. "She always said that life is meant to be lived fully," he concluded, feeling warmth spread through him as he spoke her words aloud. And I want to honor her by doing just that. As applause filled the air, Luca felt a wave of emotion wash over him, joy mixed with bittersweet remembrance. He realized that sharing these stories not only kept his mother's memory alive but also connected him more deeply with those around him. Afterward, they played games, sack races, tug-of-war, and even a spontaneous soccer match that had everyone laughing until their sides hurt. The energy was infectious. Children's laughter echoed through the square as adults joined in on the fun. As evening approached and twilight painted the sky in soft pastels, Luca gathered everyone around for one last surprise, a lantern lighting ceremony in honor of his mother. He had prepared small paper lanterns adorned with drawings made by children from the village. Tonight, he announced as they gathered close together under the stars, "We'll light these lanterns to remember those we love and carry their spirits with us." With Julia by his side, Luca handed out lanterns to everyone present. One by one, they lit their candles inside each lantern until warm glows illuminated their faces like tiny stars captured in fragile paper. As they released the lanterns into the night sky, watching them float upward like wishes carried on gentle breezes, Luca felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining his mother watching from above with pride and love. "Thank you for everything," he whispered softly into the night air. The lanterns drifted higher until they became tiny specks against the vastness of the sky, a beautiful representation of love transcending boundaries. As laughter filled Castelnuovo once more and friends embraced under twinkling stars, Luca understood that while grief would always be part of him, it no longer defined who he was becoming. Instead, it became a thread woven into the fabric of his life, a reminder that love never truly fades. It transforms into something beautiful that guides us forward even through our darkest days. With renewed hope lighting his path ahead, Luca smiled brightly at those around him, knowing that every moment spent celebrating life was another step toward healing, and another way to keep his mother's spirit alive within him forevermore. Thank you for following along on this journey.